with us a friend of the show, Zoe7. He's been on the show in the past, talking to us. Well, firstly, one of the things that he talked to us about was the subject of lucid dreaming. Zoe7 is a guy who investigates various different forms of consciousness and writes about it. And he's a published author. He's written some incredible books. Zoe7, thanks for joining us.
Great to be back, Nick.
Some people think that UFO contact is something that is inevitably intertwined with the taking of substances which change your conscious. So after that, it's often the case that a lot of people will see UFOs and stuff like that. And some people do that specifically in order to make contact with alien beings. Is this something you're familiar with?
I have heard about the instances when people are able to contact extraterrestrial intelligence, or what we may deem as the supernatural world, when they are under the influence of a mind-expanding compound that modifies consciousness as well as perception. Now, this is interesting because one has to learn how to differentiate between a subjective experience and an objective reality. And this may be tricky. You see, for some reason, throughout history, you see in certain paintings UFOs. You see, for some reason, that people are able to come in contact with some other intelligence other than their own when they are under the influence of these psychoactives. But when you're under the influence, this is still a subjective experience because you're the only person that's experiencing this. It may be a fantasy or it may be reality. There's a difference between some person off the street that drinks, or takes one of these compounds and supposedly has an experience, which is subjective, as opposed to have two or more people have the same type of experience. That's when it becomes objective. Now, what I found interesting, and there's some paintings by a shaman from Peru. His name is Pablo Marengo, whom co-wrote a book called Ayahuasca Visions. Now, for those of you that may not be too familiar with what ayahuasca is, it's basically a plant brew used for millennia by shamans of the Amazon to induce altered states of consciousness and communicate with other worlds and other intelligences. In many or most of his paintings where he's under the influence and he's painting what he sees when he's under the influence, you see these spaceships adorning his paintings. So it seems like, for some reason, when you're under the influence of these plants and chemicals, it opens you up to this other reality.
One of the things that has always puzzled me about this talk of sort of shamans who will take these compounds, and you mentioned ayahuasca, off in these sort of foreign lands, these strange compounds that they'll take, and then they'll give these reports of UFOs or of contact with spirits. One of the obvious things, Zoe7, is that, if I went out and got drunk tonight and came back and said that I'd seen a UFO, the first thing people would do would be to laugh, and it's the same with these drugs, isn't it?
Sure, and that's okay because it's healthy skepticism, but when you have, let's say, two or more people seeing the same impossible thing or the same UFO, then it stops being objective and crazy because, then there's more people.
See, it's a whole...
And it's just not one person.
Firstly, let me just say, obviously, on this show, we're not encouraging anyone to take anything that would change their head in any circumstances. I wouldn't even want to encourage alcohol. But have you ever taken this ayahuasca stuff over in this country?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I was in the Amazon a few years ago, and I had the opportunity to sample this ancient magical brew or potion. And one of the times I actually happened to be in the company of a fella that was interested also in altered states of consciousness, and he also happened to be a writer, and he was into conspiracies and extraterrestrials, kind of like fringe stuff. He took the brew and began to have his experience. About maybe 45 minutes into the experience, I noticed something strange far away in the sky, we were in the Amazon jungle. I see this light, and obviously it was an airplane. It caught my eye. And as I'm looking at this, while I'm taking care of the person that's under the influence, within maybe less than a minute, I see this other glow in the dark. But this glow was maybe 30 or 40 times as big as the airplane. So I had the reference of what an airplane in distance would look like, and the size of the glow. And then, within a minute, I had this other unidentified flying object, a UFO. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So this person that was under influence also notices it and says to me, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" And I tell him yes. And it was interesting because here was this person that was having this ayahuasca experience, and it reminded me very much of the paintings in ayahuasca visions, where the shaman is under the influence and he's painting these visions, and then on some of them you see UFOs. And here was this person under the influence of ayahuasca, and in his own mind, all the stuff that he's obviously experiencing while he's in this altered state, he opens his eyes, and in objective reality, he's seeing this UFO.
Yeah, let me just follow this. You've not done any weird compounds or anything like that. You're clear minded. You've not even had a cup of tea, right? And you're seeing the same strange thing.
Right. Since I was taking care of him, I wasn't under the influence. Yet I was seeing the same exact thing he was seeing. And it was, for all intents and purposes, UFO, because we could not make out what it was, and it was 30 times bigger than a regular airplane, the glow of an airplane. So it looked almost like those so-called motherships.
So hang on a minute. Let me just clarify this. Are you telling me that deep in the Amazon there's a tribe of people who are drinking this weird thing, which you wouldn't be able to, wouldn't be legal in this country, but they're drinking this weird thing, and UFOs are turning up?
Well, it's interesting because the Aborigines in many of these areas, sure, they are under the influence of, some of these plants, psychoactive plants, and are able to see these other, realities or pieces of reality from another reality that it come to this reality. But at the same time, there's many people like astronaut Edgar Mitchell, whom you had on your show, who's coming out and basically saying, hey, UFOs are real. It's been covered up for the past 60 years or so in Western culture, but they're slowly, again, coming out and saying the reality about this. So perhaps, they were there all along, and many even governments, like the Brazilian government, because this happened in the Brazilian Amazon, they're coming out and opening up their UFO files, and they're saying, listen, after 60 years, we're finally revealing this to the public.
So these tribes that you've had contact with and that you've hung out with, what is their take on UFO phenomena?
Well, actually, I know only a couple of shamans, and the shaman that I'm more friends with, he's from Peru. He's a Peruvian shaman, and just like other shamans, they believe that these beings have been with us, from millennia, and they have given us a lot of our systems of knowledge, of belief, of technology, and this has been like this all along. But they have been wanting to come out and interfere with the way society would function, as opposed to because society would be completely different if we knew for a fact that an alien civilization has been, or more, have been communicating with us, coexisting with us, for millennia.
I tell you what, do you know what, Zoe7, every time I chat to you, I enjoy it. I think you're a fascinating guy, investigating various different forms of conscious, and last time we talked to you lucid dreaming, this time round talking to you about tribes in the Amazon who, it appears, have the home phone number of extraterrestrials. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff. Thanks for joining us on the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nick, and I look forward to the next time. And you know what? tell ET to call home.
Right, so what the hell was that about then? 0845 688 1052, call the show.